Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2209. The topic is training, and the title is, Should You Use Machines First or Last? You may even add the question of at all. So I want to look at two training approaches today. We're going to look at powerlifters, strength training, and then muscle growth if you're trying to build muscles. Now, I do work with military personnel. I do a whole bunch of stuff with CrossFit, endurance runners, and strength for like sport athletes and like non-contact athletes. So there's a lot of categories I am leaving out. But typically in those training realms, we're still training with the intent to make something stronger or to like make something bigger for a sense of joint protection or muscular balance or joint balance. There's usually a component in the training that does boil down to, are we trying to make this muscle stronger or bigger? So you can still use the concepts, but I wanted to keep the conversation in a digestible amount. So I thought it would be good to boil it down to just these two categories. So for powerlifters and strength athletes, the answer of kind of when to use machines is actually really easy. It might not seem like it, but I'm going to give you some basic guidelines today that you can use and then kind of play and develop with it on your own. We know that our main lifts, squat, bench, and deadlift, are going to be free weight because if you're a powerlifter, that's what you're competing in. If you're a strength athlete, like say strongman, you're not doing bench, but you could substitute overhead press, you're still going to be doing free weights all the time. So typically, strength-based athletes are going to be tested on or challenged through free weight movements. So when we would consider using machines is really in warm-ups and then accessories. So for warm-ups, it kind of depends on what the purpose of the warm-up is. If the warm-up movement is to improve mobility or to cue a positional aspect that you want to have ready when you get into the main lift, then you're going to want to use free weights. So mobility is going to be better challenged through free weight movements, whether it's like banded Cuban presses. That's a great way to challenge thoracic strength and positioning, as well as just positioning you would use for overhead. In my mind, if I'm trying to cue the mobility for and position for a free weight movement, then it would be best for me to use free weights. So that way I can kind of figure out my balance points, figure out my adjustments, and get everything wiggled in and ready right as I'm about to get into a free weight movement. If I use a machine to control my position and then all of a sudden I jump on a free weight thing, I'll be shaking all over the place. So it makes sense if I'm wanting to cue mobility or positioning in preparation for a free weight exercise, then I want to use free weights. However, if the warm-up, the intent of the exercise is to develop mind-muscle connection, an example might be doing straight arm pull downs before bench press because you want to develop the mind-muscle connection of the lat tightness. So as the person would unrack the bar, in a bench press, they'd unrack the bar and they would flex their lats. They would do like almost like a straight arm pull down to get the bar over their chest. You want them to develop that isolative mind-muscle connection. If in that case, then I would use a machine. So if I want mind-muscle connection, I'm going to use a machine. So alliteration, mind-muscle, machine, right? And then the other one is if I'm cueing mobility and preparation, like positioning preparation for a free weight, then I'm going to use free weights. So that's how we would kind of manage warm-ups. Those are two kind of general guiding principles. And then accessories, it's really, do you want extra stability and bracing challenge? Or do you just want muscle development? So for example, let's say somebody's doing, deadlifts. They did a whole bunch of deadlifts in whatever variation you wanted. And then you're like, okay, I want them to get extra upper back strength. I'm probably not going to choose bent over rows. And if you've ever done that, trying to do bent over rows after heavy deadlifts, you'll know why I laughed. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. All you'll feel is your lower back blowing up. You're not going to be able to maximize the weight load. You're not really going to feel your upper back. You're just going to be like, good God, this is all miserable. All of this is awful. I'm not doing this anymore. So if I have a main lift, a squat, bench, or deadlift variation that was extremely taxing on stability and bracing, then I probably want to reduce the stability and bracing demand in my accessories so I can really challenge the working muscle. So after like a lot of deadlifts, maybe I would rather do a chest supported row, like a seal row, as a way to develop my upper back rather than a barbell bent over row. So in that case, a machine, or if you're using like dumbbells laying on a flat bench, that's similar to like a machine because it's very controlled positioning. So you would want to eliminate stability and bracing if the stability and bracing muscles are already fatigued. So in my mind, what I think of is simply asking that question. Okay, I just got them done doing squats. Maybe we were doing really challenging, super hard safety squat bar squats. So they got a lot of quads, a lot of thoracic bracing, but I still want maybe a little bit of hamstrings and glutes. I want to make sure whatever I pick after this, like whatever I pick for that, isn't going to overly demand the thoracic spine. So if I was doing maybe like having them do, let's say GHD raises where they hang-held dumbbells. So they're doing GHD raises and they're holding dumbbells down like underneath them. That's going to be awful on their thoracic spine because the thoracic spine has to be like responsible for holding the dumbbells and the positioning of their upper body, but they just got done doing safety squat bar, so I'm probably not going to choose that. That sounds awful. That sounds like a horrible choice. So if I want hamstrings and glutes, maybe I'll have instead do like maybe some RDLs on a belt squat. It's still going to have like a hang hold position for the weight, but you'll notice that that's much less stress on a thoracic spine because the torso isn't totally parallel with the floor. It's more like a 45-degree angle. So it's going to reduce the thoracic stress. So that's what you're looking for is, okay, what might be too overloaded? And therefore, how can I protect against it? So let's say you did an overloaded version of a main lift, meaning super maximal, just crazy hard variation of a squat, bench, and deadlift. Then it'd probably be good to choose machine accessories. Let's say you did an underloaded version of a main lift. So maybe you did front squats instead of back squats. You can push front squats as hard as you want, but they're never going to be as heavy as a back squat. So it's technically an underloaded variation. Or maybe you did camber bar squats, and that's a lot less stress on the upper back. So now all of a sudden you have more stress in the upper back that you could choose to use in your accessories. So for me, I think of it as if I did an overloaded version of a squat, bench, deadlift, I'm going to do machines after. If I did an underloaded version of a squat, bench, deadlift, I'm going to do free weights after. Let's say you were doing paused Spoto presses for bench press. That's going to be an underloaded variation. You're not going to be able to do a paused Spoto press of as much weight as you would normally do a bench press. So therefore, I can maybe do some dumbbell chest presses after that. So free weights after the underloaded. But if I was doing reverse banded bench pressing where they're like dying off the chest and then it actually is like an overloaded lockout, I'm probably not going to want to do a free weight after that. I'm probably going to do a machine because that would make more sense as to what they might have left to give at a top quality. So that's how we would break it down for powerlifters and strength athletes. For warm-ups, if I'm wanting to cue mobility and or positioning in preparation for a free weight movement, I want to use free weights. If I'm wanting to develop a mind-to-muscle connection, I want to use machines. When it comes to accessories, I ask myself the question of, do I want extra stability and bracing challenge, or do I just want the muscles? If I just want to get to the muscles, I'm going to use machines. If I want the extra stability and bracing challenge, I'm going to use free weights. Now, the possibly more complex but also very simple answer when it comes to muscle growth. So let's say you're training to try to get bigger muscles. I've heard arguments for both approaches. Free weights first, that would make sense because You're fresh at the beginning of the workout. Your stability muscles are going to be the strongest they're going to be. So you would do your stability demanding movements, which would be free weight movements first. So that way you can do them safer and you can perform them to the best ability. Then, once the stability and bracing muscles are fatigued, you move on to machines. Sounds like it makes sense. But then there's people who argue for machines first, because machines help wear out the bigger, more dominant muscle fibers, and they minimize stability fatigue. So then when you move to free weights, your stability muscles are still pretty strong, but now that bigger dominant fiber is dead, so you're going to be able to recruit more of the smaller non-dominant fibers in a muscle. And that, you can hear in theory, makes sense. So I actually can see how people could argue for both approaches. Therefore, I like using both approaches. So I actually use it in my own training, and I use it in my clients' training all the time. Now, some clients, if they're weak in free weight movements, it will vary how often I use free weights versus machines. And on the other end of the spectrum, if they're crazy super strong, I have to be very careful how many free weight movements I give them, because otherwise we run into connective tissue and joint issues. So strength level does come into play when choosing free weights versus machine kind of frequency and volumes. But in general, I think you can benefit from both approaches. An example could be for chest. If you want to do free weights first, so maybe you're going to do, like after a proper warm-up, you do dumbbell incline presses, and then you move to a machine chest press. Well, that makes sense in the sense that for the dumbbell chest presses, it maximizes the weight load stress you can use in that movement. So you're going to maximize the chest, but you're also going to maximize kind of the shoulder stability, the body bracing, just all the connective tissues and joint musculature. You're going to just stress everything involved. So that way all of it gets stronger, and then therefore you don't have like a weak link that could be holding back development. So maximizing weight load stress across all stabilizers, all large movements, doing a dumbbell first, I can see that making sense. And then you move to a machine. The stabilizers are dead, so now you're going to rely on the machine to balance you and guide the pathway. And you can focus on mind-muscle connection, really stretching and squeezing the chest and pushing it to a deep burn, a deep muscle pump. Or you can do the machines first. Let's say after a proper warm-up, you have a machine you really like and you're going to max the hell out of that thing. And then maybe you finish with dumbbell chest presses. Well, the machine could be great because it does overload those main large muscle fibers that tend to do the majority of the work. So you can load those suckers up. You can actually like super load them, meaning you load them beyond their capacity, so smaller fibers that tend to kind of hide, they have to get involved. And some people will argue that this is actually a safer way to overload the muscles because you're guided through the pathway, so you can't kind of get into bad positions. Some people then will also argue that that's a bad thing because then if you overload it too much, there's no way to adjust your positioning to protect against the overload and you get a muscle tear. So people have arguments either way in all of the ways, and that usually is because any approach has pros and cons. And two different approaches are going to have two sets of pros and cons. Maybe one's pros counter the cons of the other, or the other's cons counter the pros of the other, that kind of thing. So usually a mix and mash of the approaches kind of works best. If you do free weights first, it tends to be very aggressive on connective tissue and joints. You tend to need longer to recover, or you need to minimize the volume loaded. If you do machines first, it's easier on the joints and easier on muscle strains, but you might need to do more volume depending on how well you can recruit muscle fibers while doing machines. Some people are very neurologically connected. They have great mind-muscle connection. They can really do like 2 sets on a machine and feel like they've maxed it out. Whereas other people might need 1 or 2 sets to feel like they're figuring out what's going on, and then they need another like 2 or 3 sets to kind of feel like they actually fully fatigued the muscle. So a lot of it also depends on training history and overall general coordination. like mind-muscle proprioception type coordination. So I use both approaches, and I find that the variety is beneficial. The pros and cons of each approach kind of blend across, and you're able to mitigate the worst cons. So that then would counter mean you're not getting the best positives. But what it typically means is you get a lot of variety in your training, and it'll then allows you to kind of modify the training for that day. So I make up my training as I go. I write my clients' programs every 4 weeks, but I give them leniency to make some changes and stuff if they need. But for me, it's related to food, sleep, stress, and training schedule. So if I normally train my legs on Monday and Thursday, but all of a sudden I know the next Monday is going to be like super busy, Tuesday is going to be wicked, like really, I don't know how I'm not going to fit that in. So I might have trained my legs Monday and Thursday, then have to train them again on Sunday. Well, that short turnaround workout, I might want to focus more on machines. Be a little bit nicer to the connective tissues because they might not have fully healed from Thursday's workout. So I'm going to lean more into machines to kind of protect my body a little bit. Maybe I had a super stressful day and my mind is having a hard time focusing on the workouts. I don't want to do some free weight movement where I might get hurt. So again, I might lean more into machines, let the machine guide me so I can just kind of give the best I can, even if I don't feel like I have my best to give to that workout. Conversely though, let's say I'm coming in and I'm feeling freaking amazing and I'm ready to crush the day. Well, then I might want to do free weights first and see if I can hit some fun, crazy PR on some cool, awesome lift. Kind of have fun and do that. So I like having the ability to modify. So I think both approaches can have benefits. They both allow for a blend of strength progression with an aesthetic look. So you can get stronger and bigger together. If you just do free weights all the time and you emphasize trying to get stronger, you tend to build like kind of a blocky physique. Certain muscles will grow more than other muscles. You'll get tight. You won't have great mobility. And you tend to overdevelop your midsection if you do a lot of squats and deadlifts. Your obliques are going to get super thick. Your abdominal wall is going to start to distend. You get like that power belly. So you have to be careful in how much you stress getting stronger. But if you don't progress strength at all, and you just worry about getting the muscles bigger, you are going to have limited growth eventually because your weight load, your stress load progressions are going to plateau. So we want to have a blend of getting stronger and getting bigger, and just trying to find the balance between those two things that results in the best looking physique. So for me, when I was really pushing powerlifting, my obliques and my rectus abdominis, like my six-pack muscle, got really thick in order to support heavy squats and deadlifts. And I started to lose what I liked about the aesthetics of my physique. I actually have a very small bone frame because I was 165 pounds when I was 18 years old. I'm now 270. So I've gained a lot of muscle on top of this skinny bone frame. So I like having this smaller waist whenever I turn to the side or when I'm looking from the front, but I was completely losing that quite a bit when I was doing strength training. So now for the last year or two, I haven't done a lot of conventional deadlifts or a lot of squats, like free weight squats. I mean, very rarely, because I wanted to bring those muscles down, and they have come down quite a bit. So I can see that in my progression photos. And for me, it made a big difference backing off on those big lifts. But I've actually grown. My thighs have gotten much bigger. They're about 2 inches bigger. I've also brought my waist down about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches. So I've had a 4-inch change in the X factor of my physique. So my thighs have gotten bigger, my butt has gotten bigger, but my waist has gotten smaller. My upper body is actually still very good. I've lost some size in my spinal erectors, which makes sense, but I've thickened up my upper back. So I'm making a lot of aesthetic changes, and it has been allowed to happen by modifying how often I use big, heavy free weight movements versus machines. So that's what I like to do in my training, and I do the same for my clients. If I see in their videos that our body's shaping a certain way, I will progress that or change it depending on the amount of machines versus free weights in the order of the two that I put in their workouts. Cool. So I thought that was fun. My suggestion when it comes to muscle growth is to try both approaches and use a mixture. And whatever feels best for you, use that more often or use it how you feel depending on that day. Again, for power, fitness, and strength, it's pretty easy for you guys. Warm-ups, if you're cueing mobility and or positioning in preparation for a free weight movement, then you're going to use free weights. If you want to develop mind-muscle connection, use machines. For accessories, do you want the extra stability and bracing challenge, or do you want to just focus on the muscles? If you did a heavy overloaded variation of the main lift, then you want to use machines after. If you did an underloaded variation of the main lift, then it's okay to use free weights after. Awesome. Thought that was fun. If you have any questions, let me know. My email is brittlirongym@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people can help. If you want to donate to support the podcast, you can do that on our website, or you can go to Nutricost.com, which is a supplement store. I use their supplements all the time. I've actually been using them for over 10 years. You can use the code BrutalIron10 for a 10% discount, and then whatever you buy, we get a 10% commission. So that's a way to give back to the podcast if you'd like to do that. And then if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.